Bringing the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Welcome back to This Week, Congressman.
Thank you.
I want to begin with this question that Governor Christie raised here, the idea that the president is not under investigation. Is that your conclusion?
I can't comment on that, George. I can't answer that one way or the other.
One way or the, you wouldn't know whether Robert Mueller is investigating the president?
I can't comment on that at all.
What's your reaction to this news that there may be a sealed indictment?
Well, you know, there are two people, I think, just from press reporting, that it is likely to be either Mike Flynn or Paul Manafort. We haven't been informed of who it is, and I don't think it would have been appropriate for Bob Mueller to tell us. If it is Paul Manafort, and he has apparently told others that he expects to be indicted, it may help us answer one very central question in the investigation, and that is, we know that the Russian government, through intermediaries, was reaching out to the Trump campaign, reaching out to Paul Manafort and others, and offering information on Hillary Clinton they thought would help the Trump campaign, and that the campaign was willing and accepted that idea. We also know from the Washington Post reporting that contemporaneous with that, Paul Manafort is reaching out in the other direction to the Kremlin through oligarchs like Oleg Deripaska, offering information on the campaign in exchange for money he believed was owed him for work in Ukraine for a pro-Russia party. The question is, who gave what to whom as a result of these overtures? But the fact that these requests are moving in opposite directions, and what information, of course, would Mr. Manafort have to offer the Russians? Well, what would the president do on sanctions? That would be the most important information the Kremlin would want. So if it is him, it may ultimately help us answer those questions.
How about this question of the president's pardon power, and whether or not it would be appropriate for him to issue preemptive pardons before a trial?
Well, the Arpaio pardon was a horrible precedent because that case wasn't even finished, and the president was essentially sending a message, I won't even wait till the criminal cases are over to give a pardon. Now, I don't think the president's power is all as that absolute as people have been suggesting. The president cannot pardon people if it's an effort to obstruct justice, if it's an effort to prevent Bob Mueller or others from learning about the president's own conduct. So there are limitations. If it were truly unlimited, it would have the effect of nullifying vast portions of the Constitution. The president could tell Justice Department officials and other law enforcement to violate the law, and that if they did and it was ever they were brought up on charges, he would pardon them. And one principle of constitutional interpretation is you don't interpret one power as nullifying all of the others. So I don't think it's unlimited, and I think it would be highly problematic for the president if it's part of an effort to obstruct justice.
We also learned this week that the DNC and the Clinton campaign, through their attorney, helped fund this Fusion GPS effort to create this dossier, the so-called dossier, on whether the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians. We also know that the Washington Free Beacon, a conservative website, had been paying Fusion GPS as well. And this has now become a subject for Congress, congressional investigations, along with another investigation into the Obama administration's approval back in 2010 of a Russian investment in the U.S. uranium industry. The White House pointing to that and saying that this is a sign that there's collusion on both sides.
Well, here's, I think, the significance of who paid for Fusion GPS. We've known for really a long time that it began as a Republican effort. It was later picked up by the Democrats. So none of that is all that surprising. I think that is a factor to be considered in weighing the credibility of what Fusion GPS produced, who was paying for it.
Shouldn't it have been disclosed earlier?
I can't answer that. I certainly would have, liked to know who paid for it earlier, but nonetheless, that's just one factor to be considered. It doesn't answer the ultimate question, which is how much of the work is accurate, how much of it is true. And my colleagues don't seem particularly interested in that question, but that is really the most important question for the American people, and that is how much of this allegation that Christopher Steele makes and the reports that he hears are true about the Russian government wanting to help the Trump campaign. Now, a lot of that has been corroborated.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you that question. There's some things in that dossier that have been proven untrue. For example, Michael Cohen, according to his passport, wasn't in Prague during the summer of 2016. What do you believe in the dossier has been corroborated?
Well, the most significant thing to me is that Christopher Steele may have found out, even before our own intelligence agencies, that the Russians were, in fact, aiming to help Donald Trump in the election. That has now been borne out by ample evidence from not only from individual sources, but also from The social media campaign, for example, very demonstrably pro-Trump, anti-Clinton. So that central conclusion has been borne out. Now, the question we continue to investigate is, was the campaign coordinating in the Russian help? Now, that still remains to be seen. There's certainly evidence that's highly suggestive of that in terms of the meeting in Trump Tower, but a lot more work needs to be done. But I do want to say this on the Uranium One situation. If the president weighed in with the Justice Department to get that investigation going by ordering them to lift this gag rule.
Well, the White House has said that Don McGahn did contact the Justice Department.
That's not only unethical, but it's a violation of Department of Justice rules. And if members of Congress are willing to essentially cover for that, or even worse, become complicit in that, and that was the word Jeff Flake used in what I think is the most significant speech in Congress in the 17 years that I've been there. If we allow ourselves in Congress to become complicit in unethical conduct by the president, in taking apart our system of checks and balances brick by brick, by intervening in the Justice Department with a gag rule, by interviewing U.S. attorneys in New York who may oversee potential prosecutions of the president's interests, by picking someone, confirming someone nominated to head the criminal division of the Justice Department who just happens to be the lawyer for Alpha Bank, we become complicit in that kind of conduct. We will have to answer to history.
It does appear that Republicans and Democrats on your committee, the House Intelligence Committee, are now working at cross purposes. Has the congressional investigation, particularly in your committee, simply become a sideshow?
It's not a sideshow, and we continue the hard work of getting to the bottom of what happened. But look, we face very serious obstacles, and many of them go back to our chairman, who I think all too often has been willing to further the work and the viewpoint of the White House, irrespective of what we are finding in the investigation. That's unhelpful. But nonetheless, there are plenty of us Democrats and Republicans that continue to interview the key witnesses, review the key documents, and make progress in the investigation. It is still my hope that, notwithstanding all the turbulence created at the top of our committee, that we can come to a common conclusion. But it has been tough. I won't deny that for a minute.
Congressman Schiff, thanks for your time this morning.